Hello everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. We've been hired to look over some of the issues that Advanced Care Hospital has been facing, and in consideration of time, we're going to assume that you know all of the details of these issues. I'm Kate Beachy.
I'm Rachel McDade.
Misha Patel.
And I'm Kat Stolar.
So the stakeholders in the first issue are Tyler, who's a nurse at Advanced Care, and he accessed a celebrity's medical records. Also Sledge, who was a celebrity that had his medical records accessed by Nurse Tyler, and then also the hospital, which includes the nurses, the patients, the doctors, and the administration. So the ethical issues in the first circumstance are the breach of privacy when Nurse Tyler accessed Sledge's medical records because Sledge was not his patient, and then which was not acting in the best interest of the patient. Also, when Tyler sold the medical records to a media outlet for his own personal benefit. And then also another employee, Dee, at Advanced Care, she's at an ethical crossroads because Tyler told her what happened, and so she is deciding whether to tell an administrator or keep that to herself.
So Tyler's access of a patient's information that wasn't under his care was actually a violation of HIPAA. More specifically the privacy rule, and then further the dissemination of that information is a breach under impermissible use and disclosure. The fact that he had such easy access to that information could be indicative of negligence on behalf of the hospital because hacking is foreseeable, or access of information is a foreseeable occurrence. And Tyler could receive up to 10 years in prison for under violation of federal medical privacy laws. So the hospital is obviously going to take a big hit reputation-wise because this does involve a celebrity and it is a high-profile case. They'll face a lawsuit for the HIPAA violation, and then they'll have to follow a process following the impermissible use and disclosure, which includes notifying the patient, notifying the media, as well as notifying the Secretary of Breaches.
So, as one of our recommendations for this case, we suggest a simple process improvement. So along the left side of this chart, you'll see a tiered solution of classified information. So on the bottom, it'll be level 1, where all employees have access to this information. At the top, it'll be level 4, where it'll just be physicians. And so in the chart here, at the very beginning, one of the healthcare providers will use card access or login to begin accessing the information. And then the path seen on the left will be that of someone that's accessing information that they have the right to access, whereas the path on the right will be someone trying to access information that they are not able to, such as what Tyler did. So you will see, once it breaks off to the right, they will, if they attempt to access information they don't have the right to, they will then have to get, they will have to access, the request will have to be okayed by someone that's a superior to them that's in charge of that patient. And if the request is proven to, if the request goes through, then they will be able to see the information. If it does not, then the access attempt will be logged. And then in both cases, all activity when they're inside those reports will be logged as well to kind of create more accountability across the hospital. And so alongside the improvement to their processes, we suggest terminating Tyler to take a no-tolerance stance on this kind of behavior, as well as being proactive and reporting this behavior to the Department of Health and Human Services. And then lastly, being proactive and auditing their controls throughout the hospital.
So the next issue deals with healthcare cybersecurity, and healthcare companies need to be proactive at preventing hacks to their systems because a lot of healthcare companies have had some type of hack, and it's becoming a lot more prevalent within the industry. So the stakeholders in the second situation are the patient who, after having his medical records put on social media, he was subsequently fired by his employer after his employer learned that he had HIV. So another stakeholder would be the employer who's facing a wrongful termination suit filed by the patient, and then again the hospital as well. So the ethical issues that come up in this situation are the hacker hacking with malicious intent to post people's medical records on social media, and then also the patient's employer who fired him just after learning that he had HIV.
So the legal implications associated with this issue are wrongful termination. The employer did not have an actual reason to fire that employee, as the HIV does not hinder your ability to perform a job task. So the employee actually has legal standing to file suit, as well as other lawsuits that could be taken out against Advanced Care because of the information that was disseminated. People could have their identity stolen, again, issues could arise, and several other lawsuits could be opportune.
So our corrective action plan for this issue is one, to increase cybersecurity, but also offer credit protection monitoring for those that were impacted by this breach. So whenever this kind of breach occurs, the first thing to do is perform a risk assurance assessment, and it's measured on the basis of impact and the likelihood of reoccurrence. So looking at two other healthcare providers that recently have had large-scale data breaches, Anthem and Premera. Anthem, you can see, has a high impact but a low likelihood of reoccurrence because they were quickly able to find a remedy for the hole in their cybersecurity system, but they did lose 78 million patients' data. So on the other side, you see Advanced Care, which is a lower impact but higher likelihood of reoccurrence if this issue isn't kind of mended instantly. And so what's at stake, other than just monetary losses, there's additional legal filings that could come from this, reparation costs, and a threat to all stakeholders involved. So you heard that healthcare companies have been attacked more so than any other industry in the past few years. This is because an average piece of stolen record from a retail company is worth about $154, where it's worth $363 for a healthcare company. And with the pro-patient system, the way it's set up, it has not only the patient's information, but all the employees and 25 years of past research data. So through the information we were provided, we were able to identify roughly 6.7 million patients and stakeholders lost information in this breach. And so the chart below really just shows who lost data the most, and it's actually the people that we try to protect and work for the most, and that's the patients. And then broken out, you see a smaller percentage of nurses, physicians, and residents in training that lost information as well. So this hack totals to a roughly $2.4 billion loss in data from Advanced Care. And so our recommendation is to employ FireEye Healthcare Solutions. They're a leading industry-specific enterprise-level security platform. So what this essentially means is they will manage all cybersecurity risks and implement a system and then monitor that system. So using some of the specific data points that we received, we estimated that the cost for this platform across Advanced Care would be roughly $1.4 million annually versus the $2.4 billion in data that was lost. Along with this, the Mandiant solution the FireEye offers does back testing to investigate, offer crisis management, and then support and reporting for the breach that already took place.
So our third ethical issue at stake involves Dr. Kilder and Dr. Casey, who were the doctors who researched using Sheila Daniels' medical information without her consent. And Sheila wants a cut of the profits made from the medical discoveries. And finally, the third stakeholder is the beneficiaries of the research, which includes the hospital as a whole and then recipients of the vaccine. So the ethical issues at stake here are basically using materials without the patient's consent. She did not know, she had no prior knowledge of her materials being used for medical research. Also, they have to abrupt the medical advancement in order to deal with the legal proceedings following this case. Finally, the wasting of medical materials could also benefit others. These materials would have otherwise been wasted, but Sheila decided that she wants a cut of this revenue. And finally, the idea of hospital profit versus medical advancement. So basically, the hospital obviously needs profit in order to run and revenue in order to further medical advancement and R&D. But there's the ethical issue of how much profit is too much profit.
Okay, and then obviously the fact that her information was spread out was another HIPAA violation under the privacy rule and impermissible use. And there's actually a lot of discourse revolving around the legality of using human material, such as genetics. And until there's like an actual set legal precedence that is very related to this case, the hospital should just be very informed and involved in that discourse. This also impacts the hospital's, you can go ahead, impacts the hospital's reputation. They're going to take another big hit, and that means that they're going to lose investors and a lot of monetary loss, which kind of hinders their ability to contribute to the benefiting humanity that they were focused on.
So the recommendations we have for this ethical issue include providing a consent form, and while we do this, we'd like to educate patients on how they can advance the field medically, and then we'd like to reach a settlement with Sheila Daniels in order to further the medical advancement of this disease as quickly as we can. So the key takeaways, we have these business recommendations that will put the hospital in a more ethical position. So we already touched on profit improvement or process improvements. We'd like to implement an ethical training program which would help the employees of the hospital report and understand when an ethical issue is taking place. We'd like to increase cybersecurity, provide this consent form, and finally focus on some different internal and external things that we can do to positively promote the hospital's reputation.
So from a leadership aspect internally, Dr. Ehrlich actually served on several ethics committees, including the internal review board. So one could infer that because of all these issues that the hospital has faced, that he would feel personally affected and very interested in those cases, not just from a business perspective. So we recommend that he takes a coach-like approach and really sets down his employees to kind of translate his emotion and how he feels about that and the knowledge that he has about ethics to pull on his employees' ethos and maybe make it a little more relative to every employee.
So our external leadership recommendations are basically to send a letter to all the patients who were affected by this breach. And this is required legally when an incident like this happens, but we also think that Dr. Ehrlich would feel personally affected by these actions of his employees, and he would want to send this letter. We'd also like to have him issue a public statement on what happened in the breach and to be as transparent as possible with the public. And finally, we'd like to take the extra step to reach out in the community further and encourage the employees of the hospital to not only impact their community positively, possibly by joining other ethical boards or research things that they can do to put the hospital in a more positive light. And if you see here, this is a copy of the letter that we have created in order to send out to the patients. So we'd like to thank you for your time, and we'd like to open up the floor for any questions you might have for us.
Thank you. If we settle with Ms. Daniels, are we encouraging other lawsuits?
Yeah, it actually and we're also nervous that it creates legal precedents, but we think that she would actually spend a lot in court fees and for an attorney to face an attorney from a hospital, a large corporation, basically. So I think that a settlement kind of would adequately satisfy her request to receive financial compensation, which is her main priority in hoping for, a cut of our profits. It would adequately satisfy her as well as save us the time commitment, because it is a time-sensitive thing. We're working to kind of change the world and really implement or impact the entire medical field. So I think that a settlement would kind of benefit more than it would hurt.
But if the topic of using biomaterial from that's discarded from patients, if that's a gray area, I mean, shouldn't we drive this to a legal conclusion in the courts to try to get this cleared up and hopefully get the right decision that would be beneficial not just to our hospital but to our competitors' hospitals and to humanity?
Yeah, you make a really good point, because it is, on one hand, we're benefiting humanity with our research, and then on the other, we're creating huge legal precedents. So the course of action is definitely a difficult decision to make. If there's a way that they can satisfy Sheila Daniels and get her taken care of, with her needs met, as well as kind of come to a conclusion, because there's so many different parties involved in creating the legal like structure of that, or kind of making the gray area more black and white. So if we could do that while also going to getting the solution for the medical field that we're impacting, then that would be great. But we couldn't it was kind of difficult to do, a difficult decision to make.
So for me, real quick, I want to ask a question about Dr. Ehrlich. So I appreciate all the detailed recommendations on each of the cases, and then at the end you went a little bit further and talked about the organization, Dr. Ehrlich, and had some specific recommendations for him. But as you explain why it would be important and that you feel like he would do those things because he has experience in each of the different parts of the organization, you would think that maybe there should be some more responsibility on his part to better prevent this. So did you consider firing Dr. Ehrlich, and why did you decide not to ultimately fire him for what happened during this process?
Yeah, so obviously at the very beginning, we considered what kind of accountability he should assume for this. And in other cases of ethical misbehavior, like Wells Fargo, for example, sometimes you see top execs leave. But in this case, with his background being considered, and also the nature of this case, some of the things that took place were more because of proper processes or things not being in place to prevent him. We believe that he would be one of the best people to kind of go forward and bring the whole team around himself to put the hospital in a better ethical position. And one of the things we touched on at the very end was, I think you can go two routes of kind of attempting to keep your name out of the media and cover everything up, or just take full accountability. And we would suggest he goes that route of laying out everything that took place, why it was wrong, not only to the public, to the patients, but also internally. So everyone kind of understands what happened, and then going forward to a place where there's an environment now that this can't reoccur.
But you said that the hospital was negligent in this, so whose head's got a roll for that?
So first we suggested terminating Tyler.
I mean, that's the obvious one, right?
Right, and then so from
But
there.
he's just a nurse.
Right, he's a nurse, and so.
Yeah,
we don't-
not that there's anything wrong with that, but I mean, he's not in an administration of the hospital.
And so we think this really needs to come down from management. And so from the top, Dr. Ehrlich being that, we believe that he needs to implement, he needs to kind of give the right message so it can transcend through management. So the people that are just managing nurses, so the physicians, the scientists, and those that are, residents in training, everyone that may be affected kind of learns the right way and then understands why it was wrong in the first place.
So you mentioned part of your answer that I think what you're saying, Dr. Ehrlich may be the best person to help resolve the problem and take responsibility, but you also referenced the Wells Fargo case. Wells Fargo case, they decided to retain their leader, and it was only after a lot of negative attention for the company in front of Congress and also from stakeholders and Facebook that ultimately he was pressured to step down. So are you worried about any negative PR backlash if we don't take any action against Dr. Ehrlich, even if we're being proactive and trying to prevent this in the future?
Definitely, we want to take these external steps to not only just address the issues at hand, but we'd also like to further promote our employees to get more involved in the community and not necessarily just improve our reputation back to where it was, but further improve it if we can.
I would just add to that. I mean, in general, something that we considered when not firing and retaining Dr. Ehrlich, the sentiment around financial services firms, specifically large banks, is a little different to that than the public sentiment of healthcare firms. So we think that kind of plays an effect of the kind of pressure that would come to rather get him out than have him be the one to fix the problem.
Thank you. Do you have any questions from the media? Thank you.
Yeah, I just have one. Thank you very much. We have a lot of conversation about external facing media. I'm a little bit more focused on the 49,000 employees who come to work every day for the hospital system, and most of which do not create the type of situations that we're trying to deal with and have recommendations. But they are going home to their communities. They're facing questions from people wanting to know what kind of place they work for right now. And in simple terms, what should we say to them?
Well, we wanted to implement this ethical training program, and I think that our coaching style meeting where Dr. Ehrlich will address the entire hospital will tell them that. So we think that they should say, basically, this is what happened, be very transparent with the people, and then this is what we've done to prevent it from happening in the future and what we're doing to improve our reputation as a whole.
Do you think that our employees are going to look at this and go, "Oh, great, here it comes, ethical training. We've had an issue now, and other people acted poorly, and now I got to suffer for it, and I got to sit down in a conference room and listen to a boring presentation about ethics and sign my name that I've gone through ethics training, and then everything's gonna go back to the way it normally was or the way it was before?"
Yeah, so kind of to tie Tim's question to yours, realistically, we don't want to tell our employees what to say to the public or to their families or anything. We would like to hear what they really have to say and then take that into consideration. So it's not just coming from the top, but it's bottom up as well. and using their real experiences to shape the future. And then going to kind of the ethical training, we want it to be very hands-on, practical, and kind of see, maybe you weren't the one, or you won't be someone that'll misbehave ethically, but you could be in a place where you could stop someone else from doing so. And then ultimately just really tying this back to the patients. These are things that are affecting people's livelihoods, and it's not just some kind of online learning program. So finding some hands-on, application-based way of teaching it and then allowing people to apply it to their work is what we think would be best.
We also, to add on to that, we also think that Dr. Ehrlich can appeal to them with his personal emotions. I know they might not all know him personally. However, we would like to think that Dr. Ehrlich would be very saddened by this occurrence, and that if he shows his personal feelings about it, the people will be more likely to respond well.
And to piggyback off of that as well, I think that all of these issues, the sources of these issues was just fundamental morality. Someone did something that even if they went through ethics training, they still probably would do. And then a hacker, you could put him through ethics training, you still probably would hack. But I think that the employees of the hospital, if they were to go home, to their families and talk about it, hopefully they would say very good things. And hopefully Dr. Ehrlich, because he has served on those boards and he seems like an A-OK guy, hopefully he would have the heart to kind of make public statements instead of kind of hiding from the media.
We thank you, team.
Thanks.